Welcome to UFO Undercover with your host, Joe Montaldo.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of UFO Undercover. I hope everybody's enjoying their beautiful day today, wherever you may be. I know for some of us it's raining. For here down in New Orleans, it is actually cloudy, gloomy, foggy, and misty, I guess would be the best way, and about 48 degrees, somewhere around there. It's just generally nasty. It's the easiest way I can say that. But really, I hope everybody's enjoying. I know right now, I checked this morning, we had gotten our new stats in from the first of the year. We're going out to 93 countries around the world and 288 American cities. So, hello, everybody. I hope y'all are enjoying the show. And tonight's guest is going to be Larry Joseph. I have him on the phone with me right now. Larry, how you doing, man?
Well, it's raining here, too, in Southern California. and like I mentioned, rain here is a breach of contract.
You know, it's like I said before we came on, I was stationed in San Diego. It never rained the whole time I was there. I mean, I think we went like 4 months, 5 months without seeing a drop of rain, and I was like, "What the hell?" Because I've never been anywhere it didn't rain like that. Because everywhere in the South it pretty much rains all the time. Larry, let me get you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, kind of familiarize them with them, and we'll start from there. So go ahead.
Sure enough, I'm the author of Apocalypse 2012, an investigation into civilization's end, which looks at the Mayan prophecy, ancient Mayan prophecy, that the year 2012 would somehow be the end of one era and the beginning of another. And more generally, I've been a freelance science writer for 25 years, written a lot for the New York Times, written several other books. I've also served as chairman of a small plasma physics company headquartered in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And it's actually from there that I first learned about the scientific aspect of 2012, basically which will be the year of the next solar climax, and the next time when the storms on the sun are at their greatest strength.
You know, it's interesting because I just last night or actually night before, I was sitting down watching TV, and they came on with all the different prophecies leading to 2012 besides the Mayans. But at least they tried to leave the Bible out of it, and they tried to leave Notre Dame out of it, because they seem to be a little bit further in our future. But in your personal opinion, and with the research you've done, 2012, see, I've always had a problem with 2012, not so much because I didn't think something was going to happen. It's just the Mayans say the end of life as we know it and the start of the Golden Age. So it's hard for me to wrap my mind around a total catastrophe that's going to, trigger a Golden Age. But that's why I wanted to ask you what's your take on it.
Well, the simplest way to put it is that it'll be the birth of a new era, and like any other birth, it'll be accompanied by blood and pain. But the outcome, depending on the time scale, is they certainly believe to be positive. And see, I have my trouble with that too, because I wouldn't say I'm one of the more enlightened individuals. Mm-hmm. I would rather keep my cushy, cozy life, benighted though it may be, then I wouldn't trade it for a shot at enlightenment ever. I may not be a good person to ask about the good outcome, and really the question is time scales. I mean, are we talking a couple months of turmoil, a couple of years, or a couple thousand years?
Yeah, and that's the key question. I mean, I'm glad you said that, because when we're discussing this, and believe me, this is discussed a lot amongst the groups I work with, that's the thing. Is this going to be something, okay, let's say we start getting these solar climaxes in 2011 and they carry through 2012, cause some major damage to the planet, maybe some radiation spillover, maybe definitely some magnetic problems, probably kill a good chunk of the electronics. But is that going to be just it? I mean, is that going to be it, and that's what's going to make everybody pull together, or is this going to be a cycle that contaminates the planet for 500, 5,000 years? And then the Golden Age, see, that's what scares me.
Yeah.
I'm kind of, I understand the Golden Age thing, and the way the Mayans, if you take the Mayans literally, it sounds like it's going to flip. 1 minute it's going to be this, and then the next minute it's going to be that. But see, the problem is what is their minute? Is it a day, a year, a month, a millennium? And I can't find any evidence, because I guess they never went any further than that.
Well, yeah, not. Some have, but the ancients didn't, and the contemporaries don't necessarily acknowledge it. I think I mentioned to you that I wanted to confirm, first of all, that the ancient Mayan prophecy is what people say it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I went down to Guatemala and worked with some Mayan shamans who themselves had spent 20 years going around the former Mayan kingdom and talking to elders and sages who'd been carrying on the wisdom. And if nothing else, they confirmed that there is the 2012 prophecy, that it is believed to be the end of time or the beginning of time on December 21st, 2012. They can't quite decide what the definition is, but they know they believe that something's coming. I think that the more philosophical you get, the happier you can. None of the folks who I met or whose work I had related to me would be optimistic that in their own lifetime, or perhaps even in the lifetime of anyone who's alive today, that the era of enlightenment would manifest itself. It might retrospectively have been seen to start in the midst of darkness, but that's cold comfort to those who are going through the hard part and perhaps perish in it either as a result of it or just because for other reasons, but never see anything but that at the end of their life. And if you look at the geological timescales, or even a couple thousand years is a sneeze.
Yeah.
And a couple thousand years either way in human civilization. I mean, a couple thousand years ago, it was pre-chariot days. It was, it was when wild animal attacks were a major concern. So, I certainly can't take personal comfort in what I anticipate to be the timescales of the disaster of 2012.
Well, I can understand that. I mean, because it's just because any way you look at this now, Larry. But is this going to be something that starts slow? Let's say 2012 gets here and things start to happen, but is it going to be just a rapid, like a rapid change, or progressively getting worse for maybe a couple of decades before it starts to swing the other way?
My sense of it, and this is now you're asking for my opinion as opposed to the facts that I've been able to gather. My opinion is, my greatest fear is the domino effect, and that's where one thing happens, a natural catastrophe that leads to collapse of governments, which leads to war, which leads to a global movement of something that's not necessarily helpful or helpful. I certainly think we will feel the beginning of it before 2012. And there are those who argue we've already moved into this phase, and I won't disagree with them necessarily. But while things are tense and edgy right now, I don't see global civilization careening out of control. Yeah. I do see the signs where it could, yeah. But if this is what they've been talking about, I'll take it with a thank you, ma'am. This we can handle. But the one study that really opened my eyes was actually a historical study where in the Little Ice Age, a couple centuries ago, sunspots went flatline. It was the opposite of what we're seeing today. There were almost no sunspots. And there was a drought, famine, cannibalism, this is all in China, collapse of the Manchu Empire, and chaos for a good long while. And what struck me about that was the way that a natural catastrophe tipped the balance and led to so many other really unfortunate things. And it's like I said, it's the domino effect, and I think that could happen rather quickly.
Well, it's interesting you brought that up about the spots, because NASA's got this thing out. They've got us leaving the present, there's a cycle that started that ends in 2012, and it peaks out and ends. The next one after that is actually supposed to be almost as dead as the one in, was it 18 or 1668? I forgot it. The one that started the freeze in Europe.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have one extreme in 2012, and then in 2019, or no, it's an 11-year cycle, so 2022, you're going to have the other extreme.
Yeah.
And, you got to kind of wonder what's going on in between in those 11 years. I don't know, Larry. It's not looking good.
No, and I know the astronomer who's been pushing that, Don Hathaway.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting situation. It makes a certain Gaian sense. Gaian meaning a self-adjusting, self-regulating sensibility. And, okay, so the sun goes nuts for a cycle or two, as it has been, and now peaks out in 2012. And then okay, calms down. I mean, in the course of things, the sun, the sun could look back at itself if it had such consciousness and say, okay, it's just a high and a low, as we all go through periods of intense activity and then sit around and watch TV. It's similar for the sun, and the question is, so one doesn't even need to say that, the sun is moving into some horrible new condition. It just happens to be going through a normal up and then down cycle. But the question is, what does that mean for us?
Yeah.
Because we apparently, we meaning human civilization as we know and understand it, which extends back, let's say since the end of the last ice age, 11,000 years ago, we haven't seen that. And it could well, in retrospect, be part of our evolutionary development and the challenges we face and what we overcome. Blah, blah, blah. Good, positive way to look at it. I just wish it were coming now. When I got kids that I'm trying to get to soccer.
And that's the thing. I got kids. I got grandkids. I even got a great grandkid, and I'm not even that old yet. So.
Wow.
And we were talking about that the other day. Because my son was in here. He's 22. Matter of fact, last night before I left to go to Mississippi, he was in here talking to me about the 2012 prophecy. Because he's like, "Well, Dad, I'm only going to be like 26, man." I'm thinking, I know, dude, but at least you'll be young enough to kind of deal with what's coming on. I said, I'm going to be closer to 50. It's going to be a lot harder on me.
Yeah.
But you see, but that's another thing. The reason we talk about this so much is, we're trying to get people to understand that, there is a possibility that something's going to happen. I'm not saying conclusively by any means, but there seems to be a pretty good possibility that something's going to happen. So prepare yourself for it, but then how do you prepare yourself for something you don't exactly know what it's going to do?
Well, that's a good question. That's my next book is what should we do? And there's all sorts of things to do. I mean, you want to get into that?
Oh, I'll tell you what. Yeah, let's go. Because one of the things that were brought up just recently, they got those silos for sale all across the middle of the United States.
Yeah.
Those old abandoned. And somebody was asking me the other day, do I think that would be a good place for 2012? I said, well, I'll tell you what. Larry's going to be on the show Wednesday. Come listen. We'll talk about it and we'll see. Because we know they're partially shielded for radiation. We know they have their own ventilation systems, their own water systems. So I guess if you could afford one, it might be an ideal place. What do you think?
Well, if your strategy is to take refuge, and that's certainly one strategy, choosing a silo, particularly in an area that was not geologically prone or active, and also wasn't, for example, next to a nuclear weapons base.
Oh, yeah, that's another big one.
That's one way to go. And I'm not going to discourage anybody from doing that, but that's not the thrust of what I'm saying. I'm saying we got to work together.
Oh, I agree.
There's a lot of things we can do to mitigate whatever's coming and to rise to the challenge. It's everything from the personal level of preparedness, both spiritual and just make sure that you got the jugs of water and the flashlights and the escape route and all that, to making damn sure, that the government, for which we pay trillions of dollars, has plans and it has the means to carry out those plans and is willing to confront this possibility. And one of the things that I get this question a lot, and I say, well, don't you think, Larry, that if you could find out this information, that the powers that be know what you do and a lot more? And I'd say, that's likely quite right. But it's not a question. It's not their information, but their judgment. I question, and that's where we've got to help them along.
Because I think the government believes in saving, minor numbers, not major numbers.
Yeah.
In other words, they don't have any. And there's 300 million Americans. They may be planned on saving 2 million, 3 million, 10% of the population, probably no more than that. And then, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, you're going to have to know someone to get into one of these shelters. Someone with some power somewhere, or have a very high security clearance. One or the other, but you're not going to get in any other way. They're not going to just let you walk in off the street and say, hey, let me and my kids come in your shelter. They're not going to do that. Living through Katrina and dealing with FEMA, they are not set up for a disaster like what Larry and I are talking about here. This is a much larger disaster. It makes Katrina look like a walk in a park. So, I agree. I mean, there's got to be some way to put pressure on the government, but without, I know you've worked on this scientifically, and I have heard one or two other people, but I haven't seen anybody, you've got the book out, but no one's really trying to challenge the government. I guess there's not enough of us yet, is probably what the problem is.
Yeah, also, I mean, I think it's always a question of this current regime is preoccupied with something else entirely.
Kyle Bush? Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I just, don't. As I think I mentioned to you, Joe, if this were the era of Franklin Roosevelt, a Democrat, or Dwight Eisenhower, a Republican, I would have a lot more faith that they would take care of business, that they would discharge their duties, that they would understand that their mission was primarily to take care of the people, and that, well, I wouldn't expect them to do it perfectly. I would have a lot of trust. I just don't now, and don't see any reason to trust in whoever comes next. Well, hey, we don't know who comes next.
Well, because nobody I see that's coming next, I would trust. I have to be honest about that.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give whoever wins a chance, give them the benefit of the doubt, and that's fine. But that's down the line, and that's plenty hazy. So, unless I'm proved pleasantly wrong, we have to press this case. And in fact, one of the things I want to do for my next book is run a couple of opinion poll questions. You can buy these omnibus poll questions, get national surveys about catastrophe preparedness and the major candidates, and just see what the public thinks about who's capable of doing what, and with regard to 2012 and just in general. And that way, at least we can get a gauge. I'll probably wait until the nominees are decided, and we can get a gauge on what the public thinks of the candidates, and maybe match that up to their policies, and then introduce 2012 into the debate. That's my little plan, anyway.
That might work. I noticed several of the candidates got hit with UFO questions this year. So
interesting. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I think there's been three or four questions asked, and for some reason in 2007 and even in 2000, starting in 2008, CNN and some of the more major news medias have been really getting into the subject matter, which is a big switch from just in 2006. You couldn't even get them to say hi to you.
Wow.
Yeah, they've had Stephen Bessa on CNN 3 times. I think they've had Stanton Friedman on 3 or 4 times. And they just, all this Stevensville sighting in Texas, they've been blaring all over CNN for a week now.
Good.
And which is not something, but that's hopeful with the subject matter we're talking about, because they're going to lump that right into, unfortunately, 2012 is going to get lumped in with UFOs and paranormal. They're just going to drop it in there because it's a prophecy, which isn't the correct thing to do, but,
that's where you start, and then you just keep working. That's a lot better than nothing,
oh, yeah.
As far as I'm concerned. I noticed that United States Senator Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont, was asked about 2012 and had a very constructive response. And he said that, 2012, whether something major happens then or not, let's assume that it might, and let it provide the rationale for jobs and for preparations that we're going to need one way or another anyway.
Well, and that's what they should be doing.
Yeah, I know that was. It's funny, the validation I've gotten for my book, ironic funny, has come from the extreme left. Bernie Sanders is essentially a socialist who caucuses with the Democrats, and the extreme right. Tim LaHaye, the author of the Left Behind series, who's, fundamentalist Christian minister, and, makes no bones about it, the tenacity of his beliefs, wrote me the nicest blurb I've ever gotten. So I'm getting the sense, which I'm happy, it's not a political issue in the sense it's not one, it doesn't mean you're a liberal, doesn't mean you're conservative. And two, if it starts creeping into both sides from the mainstream, they might meet in the middle before we know it.
Yeah, well, actually, it might. If you're getting far right, far left, somewhere it's going to get compressed together.
Yeah.
I had, yes, I see y'all's hands. I'm going to take some questions in a little while, guys. I'm sorry, I was reading text while I was talking to you. And because I got the virtual auditorium. They're like, well, we're going to I promise y'all, probably about 10, 15 minutes, guys, we'll open up the lines for questions. And y'all can ask Larry whatever y'all want. I was thinking, Larry, I mean, so if we could get this more, I guess the trick is to get this more into the press. But I was thinking about this the other day. I mean, I know Coast to Coast talks about 2012 a lot, and Jerry Pittman and Kevin Smith and them, and we do ourselves here on the Paranormal Radio Network. It's a topic line that's been carried across all of the different programming we have. So it's getting a lot of press. I guess there's just no way to know if the government is doing anything about it. I mean, I know FEMA has a ton of underground facilities and stockpiles of this all over the country, but, what is that for? And let me ask you this, before we even talk about that, let me ask you this. What do you think from doing research, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, we're looking at solar flare activity to kick this off. But, I mean, is this going to be something, damaging the planet, or is this going to be something that does so much damage to the electronics world that, say, like China or Russia decides to take advantage of the United States' electrical problems, to say?
Yeah, that's what I see. Again, it's the domino effect. The first line of vulnerability is the satellite network, particularly with the apparent weakening of the Earth's magnetic field, which has been at the very least an unfortunate coincidence. Just as the sun reaches the height of its power and nastiness, our protective magnetic shield, which is supposed to protect us from incoming blasts of solar radiation, starts to go wonky. As many people have said, there may be a pole shift underway. I don't know that the pole shift is imminent, but even if the process has started and it takes several thousand years, that represents a weakening of the system as the poles move, and just in general, there's cracks that open up and holes and all sorts of vulnerabilities. So that really lays the satellites, particularly the non-military satellites, but also some of those, in harm's way. And all you need is a couple of key satellite sectors to go down. And again, we depend on telecommunications, banking, military security, law enforcement, you name it. Depends on satellites. You could have a situation where if the system is damaged sufficiently that some bad group or nation or even worse, some well-meaning but ultimately dangerous and injurious group tries to seize power and take control. And China did test that anti-satellite satellite. I guess it was about probably a year ago now. And it made headlines for a little while, but that was pure muscle flexing, because they showed they know where the vulnerability lies. So I would keep an eye on those activities.
Well, the satellite, I know, what was it, in 1990, 92, somewhere around there, we had lost some satellites and part of a power grid in the northern part of the United States and Canada.
89, Hydro-Quebec, yeah.
I knew it was somewhere right around there,
yeah.
And that was due, and, that wasn't, that's not even near the magnitude of what they're talking about coming here in 2011 and 2012.
No.
And some of the scientists said, and I've listened to several people talk about this, they said we have anywhere possibilities from just minor electronics problems to anything to radiation contamination on the planet to even some of the flares could actually physically reach the planet and lap them, which, anything they touched, they would pretty much disintegrate.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, you have a minor end to this, and then you have a very major end to this, and I didn't really realize that flares could extend out from the sun that far. I mean, not physically. And I had read a report on some recent findings on Mars that suggest sometime about 80 million years ago they actually reached to Mars.
That is a reach.
So, I'm thinking, whoa, wait a minute now. What kind of, is it just like extending from the sun, or is it just shooting the whole flare out and it's breaking off and just traveling out intact still?
Yeah.
So, I was kind of wondering about that, but I haven't seen anything on that. But those are some pretty wicked scenarios. And being that Earth is so close to the sun, everybody says 93 million miles. And guys, in space, that's like across the street.
It is. And, just to follow up on what you're saying, the week of September 5th through 12th, 2005, which I know I talked about the last time I was on the show, which was the second stormiest period ever recorded on the sun, and also happened to come right after Katrina and before Rita and Wilma, which that coincidence launched me into a lot of investigating for this book, investigating the relationship between storms on the sun and storms on the Earth. But what in addition to that, a couple weeks, I think it was about 3 weeks afterwards, there was a solar prominence, which is like a limb that comes out of the sun. That was the longest limb that either had ever been recorded or one of the top few. There was a question of how exact, but it reached into space millions of miles. And what you're talking about now is exactly what happened then, but
slightly
but longer. But the question is, okay, let's say it reached out 5 million miles. I don't remember the number, and please don't hold me to that. But what were the next 5 million miles like out? I mean, were they just intense bursts of radiation? You wouldn't want to come close to that thing, even if it didn't physically touch you in any sense.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I would figure triple the distance of the arm itself. So if it was 5 million, I'd figure I wouldn't get any closer to 20 million miles to the thing.
Yeah.
And so that's what they're talking about. If you get a flare burst that say reaches the inner orbit of Venus, well, you're pretty much bathing Earth in radiation.
Yep.
People don't understand. It's hard to make them understand that they think the sun is just way, way, way far away from Earth, and it's not. They don't even understand that in 3.5 billion years it's going to go red giant and engulf our planet.
Well,
we're going to become part of the sun. Well, we won't be. There'll be a little crisp charred, rock floating around in there. But
yeah.
But it's hard to make people understand this, and they don't understand that there is a real danger here. We all look at the sun for life-giving, keep us alive, keep us healthy, make us happy, which is what it does. But it's like anything else. It has its dangerous side to it.
One of the things I always like to say is the sun is only 8.5 minutes away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's what it is, 8.5 minutes, guys. So anything traveling at light speed is going to get here in that time. So if you get a burst, you don't get much warning.
Right.
A couple of minutes that they might be able to give you 3-4 minutes warning. I don't know if that's going to help you or not. What's interesting about this, Larry, is I do contact abduction research and stuff, and for about 15 years, we've been having these we call them Holocaust streams. And
call them what? I'm sorry?
Holocaust streams. A full 1/3 of everybody we interview that checks out has these dreams, and these dreams are pretty much identical.
Really?
It's a very strange thing. You can't really get a date per se, but since they're having them and they're seeing themselves in them, it has to be within their lifespan, I would assume. I could be wrong here, okay, but I would assume. The ones that live in the United States have described some pretty man, I'm losing my brain here today, but some pretty big disasters as far as, death of populations and stuff like that. What's funny is the people in Europe or in Australia or in China or in Russia are pretty much saying the same things. They're seeing the same thing. Now, what I couldn't tell is a lot of the cities these people described did not see any physical damage, but they seen a lot of death. So I don't know if it could have been radiation, it could have been a virus, it could have been anything, but they said there wasn't so much like bombs were blowing up buildings, but, you'd go into a city and it would be like a ghost town. Or some of them had described several of them had described like big dumpsters pushing people into piles, into mass graves and stuff.
Reminds me of the Carter days and the argument for the neutron bomb.
Yeah. Well, now they're trying to come up with something different there. I always want to call it a neutrino bomb, but that's not the proper way of saying it. But they got a bomb they're working on right now. It doesn't kill plants. It doesn't destroy electronics. It only kills flesh and blood, nothing else.
Yeah.
And there's no contamination. So you burst the bomb, and they say it's going to have like an 18-mile burst range. It kills everything that's flesh, and then you just roll your people in and take over. You know, the neutron bomb, they've got it down to a half-life of like 18 months now or something.
Really?
So they can burst it over a city and roll in 18 months and not have to worry about any contamination at all. That's crazy. I don't even know we need weapons like that anymore.
Yeah.
You know, wow, that scares me. And then, like George Bush working on his 200 megaton nuke, I'm like, what the hell do we need that for? That's like enough to blow up half of Russia.
Yeah, really.
You know, I mean, these are weapons I think are more for fear tactics than they are for anything else. The fear that we may use them on somebody.
Let's hope.
You know, yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. But, you know, I have watched, and I don't know if you've noticed this or not, we've talked about this, and this is probably directly related to this topic line. If y'all have been paying attention, the United States has been taking a proactive attitude as far as we're building missile defense systems, we're building long-range weapons that do not need people on board. Matter of fact, George Bush has got this new little plane they invented. It's 500 pounds. It's completely remote control. You can put a nuke on it. You can put surveillance equipment on it. It does about Mach 2. They can be mass-produced 1,000 at a time.
Really?
Yeah, and you can just fly these things anywhere you want to. So we're building those. The M1A1, they've actually got a remote control model of it now, and one of the fighter planes, they've actually got a remote on now. And then we've got all the other little ones. But the U.S. has taken a stance, and then they're building weapons for occupation, like the neutron and neutrino bombs. Those are occupying weapons. That's a weapon where you're going to kill everything in the city, and then you're planning on reoccupying that city. And you got to kind of wonder about all of this. I mean, we're trying to make it to where no one can attack us, but we can physically attack anyone on the planet without threat of retaliation. And those kind of things scare me, Larry.
Yeah.
You know, those kind of things scare me. And lasers, the missile defense systems, and you know, you got to kind of wonder. I know they're saying it's for protection, but a lot of this stuff is way overkill.
Yeah.
You know, so you got to kind of wonder. And then I heard recently that they're going to start letting us rework biological and chemical weapons again.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so I don't know what's going on there, but we're taking a much more aggressive stance where we used to be a more passive nation. We're actually aggressive like China and Russia are aggressive.
We're more aggressive than China.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with that. I really think so. I think if you had to pick the aggressive nation on the planet right now, I'd have to point to the United States.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Not, you know, people ask me, oh, it's because of Iraq and Afghanistan. It's not because of that per se. It's more of the attitude we have taken towards everybody else.
Yeah.
If you don't like it too damn bad, that's not conducive to, you know.
Mm-mm.
Let me ask you this. What do you think about one world government? Because this is something, I mean, if we're going to talk about the golden age, you know, 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years from now, we're basically saying a one world government is what we're talking about.
Okay, I'll tell you my concern about it, and because I've read about it, I don't pretend to any expertise about it, but here's where I get worried, and this is the whole other side of 2012. 2012 has entered the zeitgeist. It is. There are enough people who have an expectation that it may be a tumultuous year, and that number is growing rapidly, exponentially, that somebody, some bad group, be they terrorists, one world oligarchs, or both working in concert in some twisted way, may seize upon 2012, therefore, as a pretext for violence and destruction and conquest. I mean, you know, since people are expecting 2012 anyway, they could cloak their actions as, you know, as something that occurred because of 2012, or they could rally people to that cause. And it scares me because the better I do my job, in a certain sense, the better I do my job of spreading awareness about the possibilities of 2012, the more inadvertently I play into the hands of, potentially, of these, you know, bad guys.
Yeah.
And I'm really worried about that. I mean, it's not just me. If the fear were, if Larry doesn't do it, then 2012 won't be that well known. You know, fine. You know, I have not even a modicum of power in this whole crazy world, but you know, I know Hollywood is drawing a bead on 2012. There's major films coming out from Warner Brothers and Paramount. There's the number of websites and books is just multiplying all the time. I mean, it's growing fast. I don't want it to be seized upon as this excuse, by clever, well-funded, very calculating, callous people such as those who I think might, decide to appoint them the heads of the one world government.
And that's another thing. Who's going to run this one world government? Somebody was telling me about the World Bank a couple of weeks ago, and I'm like, well, that's the start of one world government. I said, I don't know if I would call that the start of one world government. Maybe the start of let's try to get control of all the money in the world, but otherwise than that, I don't know. Somebody asked me the other day, and I asked this to a lot of people, is it possible in the current structure of our planet for a one world government? I always have to say no. Because I don't see Americans sitting back and letting 1.3 billion Chinese or 1.2 billion Indians elect the next leader of the world. I fundamentally think Americans will have a problem with that. Not just us. I think Russians will, and Brits will, and Australians will as well. So,
sure.
I don't know how we're going to ever achieve this one world government. How is there going to be an equality in this when some societies so far outnumber other ones? So I don't know what they're going to do there. Now, of course, if there's a big disaster and 600 billion, Chinese and Indians die, well, then, of course, that levels the playing field a lot more. I just hate to have to see, an enlightened planet come through, death. But if that's what it takes, that's what it's going to take, I guess. Mm-hmm. Somewhere along the line, we got to grow up, Larry. I mean, we can't keep where we're going, because sooner or later we're just going to blow ourselves up anyway.
There is a sense of that, and in a way, I'm really, it gives me new respect for the diplomats who kept the Second World War from going into a third and Third World War, which is nuclear. I mean, I think we did grow up some, and there was some awfully good work done. The fact that Russia and the United States did not come to blows with their brand new sets of nukes, which could have really destroyed each other. There's a lot of pride to take in that and a lot of hope, but we can't rest on our laurels.
Yeah. Well, and there's one thing I think that helps China, the United States, and Russia keep from getting into a nuclear war is the fact that you can't nuke one without effectively nuking yourself.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you nuke Russia, it's gonna fall out on the United States, and China's almost directly sharing the same trade winds as us. So, if China was to nuke us, well, we export 60% of their grain. Well, 60% of their grain they import from the United States. So, I mean, they just killed their own food source and contaminated their own country, because the wind's just gonna fall out across the ocean and land right back on them. And so, really, there's no real way of people always talk tactical nuclear strike. I said, not in the northern hemisphere. There's no real way of doing that. Maybe a very low-yield nuke, but otherwise than that, I don't even see how you can do it.
No, the only way I'd see it is an exchange between China and Russia.
Yeah.
Because I always felt that China wants Siberia, and Russia can't really hang on to it. I mean, Siberia's as big as the continental United States, has 8 million people.
Yeah.
China could use the land space, the minerals, and they've got the population to put in there. That's something I keep an eye on.
And plus, now they found out the oil up there in Siberia.
Yeah.
Which of course is helping the Russian economy, but I don't know. I don't feel that Russia's the threat it used to be, and now that they're closer to a democracy than a communism country, I don't know if they'll ever be the threat that they were. I know they got with China, and they all buddied up with China, but there's so much hatred between them two countries. That's something that'll never last. Sooner or later, China or Russia is going to take advantage of it.
I think so.
And you're right. I agree. I mean, any way it goes, and this is what people don't understand about China. China's a little country with a lot of people.
Yeah.
What is it? Half the size of the continental United States.
I believe so.
And you got 1,300,000,000 people living there. They can't feed themselves, can't clothe themselves. They have to import, and basically they need land. They got to expand.
Yep.
And they're not going to be able to do it on this side of the world because no one's going to tolerate it. And the only options they have is Europe or Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't attack Europe without getting into the war with the United States, but you can attack Russia without getting into a war with the United States.
Yeah, they've got a 5,000-mile border.
So I don't know how. I feel it's just a matter of time, to be honest with you. And maybe 2012 will be the kicker.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that'll give them the kicker to jump. maybe Russia will become unstable, and China will say, well, look, we got to go in and stabilize Russia, guys. So we're sorry,
And
but
that's that domino effect I keep going back to, because you know what? When there's chaos in one part of the world, or when something breaks down, it gives all these other dark schemes a chance to see the light of day. You know, I mean, if China were to march on Russia right now in some fashion where they threatened and they warned and they lined up troops and there was back and forth, the United States and Europe would do whatever it could to calm the situation down and bring them back. You know, there would be a process of diplomacy that more than likely would work. But if all of a sudden the United States and or Europe are plunged into some sort of chaotic situation by natural catastrophe or some other means, and then China moves on Russia, we're not going to have the diplomatic wherewithal, the public will behind us to attend to that situation. You know, when a Katrina-like situation prevails throughout our country or something, you know,
too busy licking our own wounds
Yeah,
to be lending aid to someone else.
Yeah.
And then that's the truth of the matter. And that's you know, of course you also have the same thing, you know, because India wants Tibet, so, you know, China may invade Russia, India may invade China.
Oh, wouldn't that be ducky?
You know, so because they want Tibet, and the Indians already told the Chinese if there's any more attempts on Dalai Lama's life, they'll consider it an act of war.
Oh, wow.
And the United States has been buffing India up for the last decade because, you know, we wanted to offset China's economy.
Yeah,
because
sure.
they were starting to catch up with us, so we buffed up India, which really hurt China's economy again. And but someone told me the other day, we got to worry about China passing and stuff. I said, China made $2 trillion last year. The United States made $13 trillion. And
Whoa.
we're forecast to make $20 trillion this year. I said, China is nowhere near catching us, guys. Just so y'all know that's just one of them political things you hear that want to make people crazy. But if you go look at the numbers, you'll see they're not even catching up with Russia yet.
Good.
You know, they just got a long ways to go. And they're like 11 or something. And with us beefing up India and outsourcing to them, we're effectively building India to keep an eye on China is what we're doing. You know, so we don't have to. But that's what I'm saying. I mean, if you get this 2012 event and Russia collapses and China decides to take advantage of it because we're too busy doing something else, India may feel, well, you know what, they're occupied fighting Russia, we'll just take Tibet now. You know, and then now you got a big disaster going on in half the planet that, you know, you're not only licking your own wounds, but you got to keep an eye on all of this because you know this is going to snowball into something bad.
Yeah.
You know, so, and they all got nukes now. It's not like the old days when they didn't have nukes, they all got nukes. I mean, they ain't got a lot of nukes, but, you know, I think there's 800 nukes between India and China, but that's plenty enough to...
Oh, that'll do it.
Yeah, that's plenty enough to wreak havoc on the planet. So, you know, yeah, you're right. You're going to have to worry about the dominoes effect. And you know, not so much in the United States. I don't think like Canada or Mexico is going to try to invade the United States, but or vice versa. We may, well, you know what, though, Larry? We may try to annex Canada and Mexico.
Well, Henry Clay said 40 Kentucky riflemen could take the whole thing about Canada.
Oh, yeah, I could send my 2 chihuahuas up there. They could take Canada.
But, you know, the Canadians politely disagree.
Yeah, they politely disagree because they know what'll happen. They don't have no army. Oh, that's just funny. But, you know, that would be a good start to a one-world government. If the United States would just go ahead and get with Canada and Mexico and say, look, guys, we're just going to annex y'all. I mean, we're one country basically anyway. You can't survive. Y'all using our electricity, watching our TV, using our resources. You know, you might as well just become part of the country.
Well, Lou Dobbs of CNN would argue that we've already taken that step with the North American Union.
Yeah, we have. You've got, and then there's that, what was that deal we did with the South Americans where there's something we cut where that we limited all the South Americans' army sizes, and we also kind of, they're not protectorates per se, but they're real close to being protectorates.
Interesting.
And a lot of the countries, and I think there's only, well, you got Cuba and, where's Chavez out of Canada? Venezuela. That's really the only two spots that are even a bother for the United States on this side of the world. And really, they're both only the size of, you know, a hole in a wall. So we're not real worried about them. But eventually we'll go do something about Venezuela. Cuba, I figure, will fix itself. Eventually, Cuba's just going to become part of Florida. It's when they get a free leader over there, we'll just do like we did with Puerto Rico and make them a commonwealth. You know, that's what's going to happen there. But you know, so basically, this side of the world pretty much flies under one banner. It's the other side of the world you have to worry about. You don't have to really worry about Europe so much, but you got to worry about the Middle East, and you got to worry about, you know, China and Russia, places like that, the Far East. And, You know, and it's like the thing with Taiwan. You know, that I'm surprised Taiwan hasn't started World War III or triggered 2012.
I know.
You know, because Chinese want Taiwan so bad they can taste it. And the U.S. is like, there is no way we're going to let you have Taiwan. I mean, we keep half a dozen Agus cruisers parked in the channel between them, loaded down with nukes. We're like, just try, guys, please. You know, I don't get it. Maybe they should say, okay, look, China, we'll give you Taiwan, you give India Tibet, and everybody will be happy. And, you know, we'll split.
China would take it in a minute.
Oh, yeah, they would.
Yeah.
They would make out way better on it. Because Tibet, what is it, mountain range?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a big part of the country. It makes up a third of China, by the way. It's a huge part. Tibet is actually a huge part of China, but it's not anything that can really be used for anything.
No, it's magnificent and it's spiritual. But
oh yeah, it's a beautiful place, but I mean, it's not. You're not going to go up and grow massive crops or raise, you know, lots of farm animals and stuff like that. It's just not that kind of area. And I guess India just wants it because it belongs to the Dalai Lama. It amazes me how India has taken the Dalai Lama, like, and just immersed them into their culture.
yeah.
It amazes me. I mean, a full third of the Indians now follow him around. I'm like, how in the hell would that happen?
Well, he's quite a, you know, he's quite a figure.
Yeah, yes, he is. Now, that's somebody I'd like to be able to ask about 2012, what he thinks about it.
Me too. Me too. I've shaken his hand, but not that he would remember, you know.
Yeah.
And I never got to ask. But for example, one of the arguments against 2012 is there's no Tibetan prophecy that points to that date, and there are people who have phonied up ancient Tibetan prophecies to make them work out to the year 2012 as the end time or whatever, and it's baloney. And in my book, I investigated that. But, you know, you get kind of crazy. If you want to make an argument, you kind of look for corroborating evidence and say, oh wow, here Tibetan philosophy says 2012, and it didn't take but about an hour to break that down and see that it wasn't phony.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I know we're getting close to break, so we're going to grab Instant Karma's question because he's been patiently waiting up there, jumping up and down. Instant, why don't you come up, man? Give us your first name and location, and you're live on there with Larry.
All right, thanks, Joe. Yeah, I'm Jason, and I'm kind of in the middle of nowhere in Texas right now. And interesting program you got here, and in particular, one of the lines of research that I've been going at is taking quite a look in 2012. And Larry, you alluded to it earlier, like some of the media perception that's going on in 2012. And one of the things I wanted to point out was, you know, just here on Monday, you know, a couple of days ago on Martin Luther King Day, I turned on the History Channel. And I'm inclined to remind them, they don't have anything about Dr. King, they don't have anything about the Civil Rights Movement. I turn on the History Channel, and basically the first program that they run is a lot of the prophecies, you know, Hopis, Mayans, I don't know if they mentioned some of the Egyptology, but that's one of the things I've been looking into that somewhat ties in. You know, they basically have a thing about all of the 2012 prophecies. The program immediately after that was you know, the top 10 things that could wipe humanity out in ways we could all die. You know, everything from global warming to us nuking ourselves to, you know, that big rock from outer space that would cause another extinction level event, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then the program immediately following that one was, you know, what would happen to the world and all of our structures of humanity was done. Which I found that just kind of interesting, and I've noticed in particular, I want to call it in the last couple of years, I don't know, the whole 2012 thing seems to have kind of taken up a life of its own. I mean, used to just be, you know, something that would be discussed, you know, dark hours and, you know, paranormal chat rooms, somewhat like on the internet right now, but I don't know, the mainstream media seems to be getting on the bandwagon extremely heavily a lot right now, and they almost look at it in an extremely apocalyptic light, as if nothing can be biblical about it, you know, basically, we're all going to die. I mean, I know you've noticed that, and if you have any more thoughts on it, I'd like to hear that. And another thing that I've been wondering about the entire 2012 thing is it seems like, again, all of the, you know,
that it's true. I can just see the growth since I started researching the topic in 2004. Just in sheer numbers on the web and showings of that documentary, and I've had, I don't know, 4 or 5 film crews at my house. It just keeps going. I think Alan Weissman's recent book, The World Without Us, has, which is an excellent book, has also prompted that sort of imagination. I have to say that his book is not nearly as gratuitously pessimistic as a lot of the interpretations of it, or free associations on riffs on the idea that the media has done are. But in defense of their catastrophic interpretations, I find myself having to. I do that too. It's scary, and like we were talking about earlier in the show, the timelines are such that that's what's the scary part. It may be that 2012 signals the dawn of something great and wonderful and an enlightened age and a way out of many of the messes that we're in by our own creation or otherwise. But how long is this? Is it going to hurt? And I know. I mean, I have young kids, and it has made me, like as is the case with so many other parents, really conservative. That doesn't mean right wing or left wing, but it means conservative. It means no, protect. Something's bad coming. It brings you down to a very primitive level of security, and I imagine that the first blush of reaction that people would have when they hear about the potential for 2012 to be a terrible, wonderful, dramatic year is fear, and the media is responding. That's not to say that as we progress towards 2012, there might not be a rapid development towards the more nuanced and balanced and thoughtful kind of coverage that I think you, Jason, are waiting for.
I don't know. Now, here's another one for y'all guys. I was talking with a group the other day, and they said, well, what happened if we had alien visitation in 2012 on the winter solstice? That would trigger the golden age without any disasters at all. I don't know if I don't exactly know how they come to that conclusion, because personally, I don't know if the whole planet's ready for to accept the fact that there may be something out there other than us.
No, but I'll tell you, if I had a choice, I'd take a couple of aliens dropping by.
Oh yeah, so would I. See and that's the thing. When we talk about this, and I guess that's the hardest part, is to really find out what this literal translation is. I mean, is it stretching us out, or is it just going to be a flip-flop? All of a sudden, something's going to happen, and everybody. I had some of the groups out of Sedona, Arizona, tell me, well, no, it's just going to be a consciousness change overnight. I said, what do you mean? I said, one morning we're going to go to bed, 6 billion of us, and the next day we're going to get up and we're going to all have a basic consciousness shift. I said, I guess that's possible. I'm not exactly sure how it's possible, but not without an event. I can't see humanity changing its ways without something pushing it in that direction, I guess.
No, I agree with that. I did ask Gerardo Barrios, one of the 2 Mayan shamans that I work with in Guatemala, about what 12/21/12, what that day would be like. Because I've tended not to focus so much on that date as the great off switch in the sky being flipped, but it is the specific date on which the Mayan calendar, as interpolated into our calendar, runs out. And he said something that was very poetic. He said, it'll be the moment when you realize that twilight has deepened into night, and that you've entered a darkness that the light will come again, but you're just, in this case, just won't be sure how long it'll take.
Yeah.
And I thought that was he didn't come up with a laundry list of, Everest will explode and the Atlantic will boil, that sort of thing. But it speaks to a shared awareness. I try to avoid the word consciousness just because I don't really know what it means.
Yeah, I don't either, so I feel bad.
But, that's me.
Well, no,
And you, Joe.
when you start dealing with the New Age, you gotta be careful because some of these terms that they were talking to me a couple weeks ago. I'm like, what? I said, y'all are all crazy. Y'all know that, right? I get emails all the time about that. I got a lot of New Age friends, but I'm not a New Ager per se. I give them a hard time. But guys and girls, we got to go take a break, so I want everyone to please stay tuned to UFO Undercover. I'm your host, Joe Montaldo. I'm sitting and speaking with Larry Joseph, and we'll be back in about 7 minutes. We clear.
Joe.
Yeah.
How long you need